Most people would know who Mekonen Ketema Yifru is, but they would know who Ketema Yifru is, especially for Africans.
Among the things that he did was basically played a huge role in the creation of the OAU and having its headquarters in Addis Ababa.
He was a foreign minister who helped create the Organization of African Unity.
Then he was forgotten.
Now, his son is on a mission to make sure his story,
And Africa's is told. This is his journey from a 7-year-old boy.
to a keeper of his father's Pan-Africanist flame.
I want to know from the very outset who your father is.
My father was the foreign minister of Ethiopia in the 60s. He came from very humble background, a place called Gara Muleta, Harar. Became a private secretary to the emperor, which actually helped his career a lot because that's where the emperor decided to make him his foreign minister.
There were leaders that played a major role, and there were others who were actually advocating for factions. Tell me about that.
So the idea was introduced by Kwame Nkrumah, president of Ghana. So when he introduced this concept, African unity, some of the countries decided, you know what, we can't have unity right now. Let's do gradual unity. Based on that, two groups were formed.
Can we say that was the golden age of African diplomacy?
I believe so, because we had countries fighting for African unity. We had countries working on conflict resolution.
Tell me about the memo that he wrote to the emperor.
He was very close to the emperor, but he was removed from his position once the emperor read it.
What is the most important thing for Africa today? Mekonen Ketema Yifru. I mean, most people would know who Mekonen Ketema Yifru is, but I understand they would know who Ketema Yifru is, especially for Africans, including this generation and the generation that came before this generation, would know about your father. But I want to know from the very outset who your father is, why you are invited to this podcast today.
So my father was the former, and before that, I want to thank you for having me on your program.
Okay.
I appreciate it. So let me start. My father was the foreign minister of Ethiopia in the 60s, most part of the 60s. Just to let you know, he came from very humble background, place called Gara Muleta, Harar. And he grew up there, and when the Italians invaded, he went to Djibouti, Kenya. He was a refugee out there. And later on came back, got the opportunity to go to high school in Addis. Later on, he went to university in Michigan, Holland, Michigan in the US, where he studied political science. Second degree was in Boston University. Came back to Addis and joined the foreign ministry. Just to make it a little bit short, became a private secretary to the emperor, which actually helped his career a lot because that's where the emperor decided to make him his foreign minister. Among the things that he did was basically played a huge role in the creation of the OAU and having its headquarters in Addis Ababa.
That's the major area. One of the biggest points that I want to recognize, and I want to actually talk about the creation of the Organization of African Unity, or AU.
Sure.
My understanding was there was an organization that is called the Organization of African Unity. It was created by leaders from across Africa. Yeah. But my thinking was not right because there were leaders that played a major role, and there were others who were actually advocating for factions, maybe the Monrovia group or Casablanca group. Tell me about that.
So the idea was introduced by Kwame Nkrumah, the president of Ghana. So when he introduced this concept, African unity, some of the countries decided, you know what, we can't have unity right now because, let's do gradual unity. So based on that, two groups were formed. The first, of course, was the Casablanca group, which had President Kwame Nkrumah, President Secretary of Guinea, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, and so forth. On this side, 26 members decided You know, the Casablanca group were 6. 26 members decided that no, we can't have unity now. This is Liberia, Nigeria, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, the big ones. So there was a split. They're basically labeled as the conservative group, the Monrovia group. Casablanca group are the most radical, they say, but they wanted unity right away. And it wasn't possible to do that at that point because some nations decided that, it's not unity, we cannot do unity, but we can work on gaining some kind of unity.
Absolutely.
So that's where Ethiopia stepped in when 2 factions appeared. And the split was really dangerous for the continent because, they were manipulating hands. Former colonialists were getting in there and making sure that the split was getting wider and wider. So at some point, Ethiopia decided that, we should come and bring these groups together, bridge the gap. And they actually did that. And on May 25th, 1963, as you know, the OAU was created.
Where did they get the idea of bringing Africa together? I don't think the European Union was there.
No.
UN was there.
No.
Does that come from the UN?
No, it's this is based on the concept of Pan-Africanism.
All right.
Back in the late 30s and whatever, you can go back to the thinkers of Pan-Africanism. And Kwame Nkrumah was a student of them. He actually got together in London, where he went to school. And he studied Pan-Africanism from those people out there.
All right.
And that's how he had the concept of, it's time to unite Africa because you can't do anything. A single country cannot do much. And he was ahead of his time, by the way, President Kwame Nkrumah. Unfortunately, he couldn't sell his idea to the rest of the continent. Only 6 countries could buy it.
All right.
Yeah.
Can we say that was the golden age of African diplomacy in general?
I believe so, because we had countries fighting for African unity. We had countries working on conflict resolution, like they did, like the Algeria-Morocco War, the Nigeria conflict, the internal conflict, and the Congo as well. So I think it was. I mean, if you go back to the 60s and read much about Africa, you'd see so much. I mean, the first 10 years of the OAU, so much was done back then. And of course, gradually when the leaders left, of course, things went sour, I think. But yeah, I think those were the golden years, I believe. Yeah.
What's your memory like about your dad, his involvement in the creation of Organization of African Unity and his contribution to Ethiopia? Because at the outset, you mentioned some points about your dad, that the fact that he came from Gara Muleta, you mentioned. But I don't believe that is it about your dad. There is a lot to tell about him. Tell me about your memory. If you had interactions, talk about Africa, his takes about where Africa was going.
So I was almost 7 when the popular revolution here happened in Ethiopia.
Yeah, right.
In 1974.
Okay.
So I didn't, have much sense back then, when you were 7. But and then he was taken prisoner for around 9 years. It's after he was released from prison that we had this talk. And let me tell you, the passion that he had for Africa, it was incredible. I could hear him talk to his friends, around the continent. It was incredible. And I had the chance to talk to him as well. He had so much love for the continent, and the passion that his colleagues, the foreign ministers and the leaders who had back then, it was Africa this, Africa that. And I think, I mean, I'm not saying that things are not good now, but the passion then was a little bit up there than it is now, to be honest.
Yeah. We were talking about this generation understanding what is happening in Africa, or learning about the forefathers of the continent, Africa. myself included, going to school in Ethiopia and abroad, what we have is, we learn about Africa, but mostly we learn about Africa being colonized and dominated by the European powers in different times, different part of the continent. Now we hear about our heroes, the likes of your dad. What do you think should the generation that is now understand about the forefathers that fought for the continent, Africa and Ethiopia in particular? And of course, we mentioned about Adwa. We talk about the ones that fought during the Battle of Adwa, and the victory was for Ethiopia. That's a great thing. But apart from that, I don't think the new generation, this generation, is told about the forefathers of the continent. So what is the assignment that we have today?
Well, I think first of all, we have to teach our students, the young people. I think it has to be in curriculums in schools, because I don't fault them for not knowing, because if you're not taught in schools, how would you know about Ketema Yifru, about Haile Selassie, about Nkrumah, about Sekou Touré and all those people? How would you know? So my thing is, the best thing to do is teach it in school. I mean, there should be a curriculum. I mean, we're talking about these people brought 32 African leaders together here in Addis, and they created an organization. The European Union was not created. And to do that, it took a lot of effort. It took a lot of passion to do that. And I think if our young people learned that, I mean, they would want to be a Kwame Nkrumah. They would want to be a Ketema Yifru. I mean, we should instill that in them, I think. That's what I believe. That's what I believe.
So you wrote your book. After writing the book, you gave your first draft to one of your children. Yeah. And what was his reflection and what was his take?
So my son is Yilma Mekonen.
All right.
So that's the first draft I gave was to my son, Yilma. And he couldn't believe it. I mean, that's his grandfather. I hadn't said much about their grandfather before. And he had the opportunity to actually read the details. So my son, I think now, is a Pan-Africanist. When we talk about Africa now. It's such, I mean, I'm just so happy, I cannot tell you, because we have these deep conversations about Africa. Thanks to this book. So this book has done wonders for my son too.
All right.
And myself.
Amazing. A lot has changed since the time of your dad and Emperor Haile Selassie. The Red Sea back then and the Red Sea that we have today is not the same. Eritrea is gone, and other places in the continent have different features than the features that they had during independence because of war and other things. Are we on the right track?
I think we are. I mean, time cannot stand still. I mean, things have to change. Of course, Eritrea is an independent nation now. Back then, it was a province of Ethiopia, and we had access to the sea. In fact, I mean, we had real access to the sea. Now we don't. And I believe a country has to have access to the sea. It's the right. And I think there's somewhere in the UN Charter somewhere that it says that a landlocked country, has to have access to the sea. So I think we should negotiate and have access, because we have 140 million people here, and we can't just stay landlocked forever. So this is, regional integration. I think it's all about that, isn't it? Using each other's resources to develop. So one can use the sea, and Eritrea could get something out of us. So that's how I look at it. And things have changed, obviously. And again, time does not stand still. Issues have changed somehow. So that's how I look at it.
Amazing. The African independence was for different countries in the continent in the 1960s, and your dad and the emperor, Ethiopia started to create. Of course, you said Kwame Nkrumah was there as well as the forerunner of the idea of Pan-Africanism and Organization of African Unity.
Sure.
Was it possible for a continent that is really young, not even young, a baby, to think of a unity, then talk about Pan-Africanism during that time? Like, I think a newly independent country would think about making its people strong and make them understand, or have them an idea of what a country is, an independent country is, before actually forging a unity. I'm not against the African unity. It's a great thing for the continent to have that unity, but is that the right way? Because the reason I'm asking you this question is many people have reservations about the impact that the now African Union is bringing towards changing the lives of the people of the continent. I mean, we are not as developed as we're supposed to be. Like, we have the resources and everything, but we're not there. And do you really believe that the organization that your dad, the emperor, and the leaders back then fought for, is it actually providing towards the cause that it was created for?
No, first of all, I agree with what you said about how can young nations, how can they just unite? That's basically why they didn't buy the idea of Kwame Nkrumah. They decided, we should do it gradually. And basically the OAU is a compromise of the Casablanca and the Monrovia group. It's because it's a compromise. And what they decided was, we will do it at a certain point. And I think they laid down the foundation. It was up to the next generation to take it a little bit further. But unfortunately, it never happened. And I'm going to say this. I'm going to be very honest about this. The Organization of African Unity, I think, has 54 members now.
Yeah.
An organization can only be as good as its members. The OAU by itself cannot do anything. It's under the leadership. The leadership has to come up with these ideas, has to develop the content. The OAU is only an organ that is under these leaders. And I think these leaders at some point should take the mantle from the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Haile Selassies, the Ketema Yifrus, and they should make a mark for themselves. And they should lift their people up. And I see I think it was 2060 or the projects that they have. I think those are very good ideas. And hopefully, it will happen. And I think they'll be successful. And I think we'll be on the right track. But again, the Organization of African Unity has changed into the AU, the African Union. But it's all up to the leaders. I mean, at this point, I think it's the leaders who have to decide, should we go on the path that Kwame Nkrumah, Haile Selassie, Sekou Touré, Ketema Yifru went on, or should we just leave it alone and do our own thing? And I think unity is the right way to go. I think I'm a big fan of African unity. So hopefully they'll go on that track again.
Okay. I don't have any issue with the nomenclature, but I heard there was this discussion about naming it the Organization of African Unity. People had different ideas. The leader of one country says this, and another country forwards another name. And finally, they decided the Organization of African Unity to be the name of the organization. Now it is changed into African Unity or African Union. Why not keep the first one and the work on the progress, work on the reforms and other development related issues? I mean, do you really believe there is anything positive coming from changing the name without actually changing the core of it or the essence of it?
I honestly don't know why they did that, but Organization of African Unity, African Union, for me, it's all the same. It's what you do in the end. I mean, are you going on that same path or not? That's my thing. I think one thing that the AU has that the OAU had at some point, which was not a good thing, was non-interference in the internal affairs of member states. And that's where you keep quiet when really bad things happened. And the OAU had to do that because if they hadn't put that clause in there, I don't think the OAU would have been created, to be honest with you, because there were so many issues back then with different countries. So they had to put in the clause. But now I think the AU does not have the clause. They've done away with it. But for me, OAU, I honestly, I would love to ask them why they changed the name. There might be a reason, but for me, it's not about the name.
Absolutely.
It's basically what you do, isn't it? It's how you serve the African people. That's how I look at it.
Definitely.
At the end of
All right. Did you come into the idea of loving Pan-Africanism after you learned about your dad, or you learned about your dad and then start loving Pan-Africanism?
So let me tell you, when I was a kid, those mantles, the pictures that you have on the mantles, we had my father with Jomo Kenyatta.
Yeah.
There were leaders, other African leaders. So, it was just, I was a Pan-Africanist when I was a little kid. That's how, because if you're exposed at a very young age, it's going to be Africa this, Africa that. And for me to see my father with Jomo Kenyatta and other pictures there, I think I was a Pan-Africanist before I knew it, before I was a young kid. So for me to write this book, of course, it really strengthened that passion in me. But I believe that I was way before that. Yeah.
Let's talk about the making of Mekonen. You studied in Ethiopia, then you left for the US. You went to first, I believe, Michigan, then came back to DC and studied at
the George
Washington University. Tell me about the journey.
So when I left here in 1985.
All right.
Yeah. So those were the days where you don't look back because you're either drafted to become a soldier, and I didn't want to. I don't have anything against soldiers. I think it's an amazing thing that they do, but I wasn't into that, and many kids were not. Right. And especially when you're drafted, you don't want to fight, and you're thrown into a war that you don't believe in. So I got the opportunity to study there. I went to Michigan. My brothers were there. Good for me because there's the culture shock and all that stuff. Yeah. So it was very easy. It was a smooth transition for me. And I went to school, as you said, a little bit in Hope College and George Washington. And then I was able to work for different agencies, International Republican Institutes at some point, State Department, USAID and all that stuff at some point. Yeah. So that was my trip and my life in the US.
Was there any time in your life where you thought of the contribution of your dad towards uniting Africa and contributing towards Ethiopia? And was there any point that you thought, like, let me do something for Africa or Ethiopia, coming back to Ethiopia, do something for the continent or the country?
It's always on my mind. I want to give back like my father did. Not as much as he did. Obviously, I cannot do that, but it's always my dream. Even here, I plan on creating a foundation under his name to do more work, to continue some of his work. So it's been always on my mind to do a little bit that he did, because I can't say, he has done so much. So a fifth of what he did,
All right. Were you guys privileged? I know that your dad had a very humble beginning.
Yeah.
We can say the same about the emperor himself, because he came from not from the part of the town, the part of the country where privilege is given out. He came from still from the nobility. Every advantage was there for him. But do you really believe that you guys were treated the same way as the rest of the people are? Tell me about that, because people have their understanding, including it could be a propaganda, or there could be some element of propaganda to it, or there could be some truth to it.
Yeah.
So I want to discern. I want to have that idea of clarity about what the nobility used to be, what people in power, like the likes of your dad, used to be, and the rest of the people in the country. Because what we have is an idea that is given by a history lesson, a very, not a very comprehensive one.
Yeah.
All right, tell me about that.
So, of course, when I was born, he was a minister, a government minister. So, and we can look at the government ministers today, how they live. And, of course, government ministers have a certain privilege that they live in. And it doesn't mean that it's like a posh life. They're still government workers. So, in that sense, I guess we did. But mine was cut short. When I was almost 7, my father was thrown in prison, and it was downhill from that. We survived through actually people helping us out. Could you imagine? I mean, here's a man that did a lot for his country's continent. His family were dirt poor at some point. So I don't know privilege, to be honest with you, because I was 7, almost 7 when he was in prison, and there was no money in the house. We were being helped by people. And it was later on that when he got out of prison and, he went and got a job and things changed around. By then, my brothers had left. Most of my brothers had left. It was just 2 of us in the house. So, to be honest, at my age, no privilege. I mean, everything was taken from us as far as there was no salary. My dad's salary was not there. If we had property, it was my mom's side. It was all taken. So, I mean, we were dirt poor. I mean, that was the reality for us. So, there was, before that, you had that privilege in a sense that, of course, he's a minister. There are certain things that come up with that, but not this posh life that the propagandists were talking about. No, absolutely not.
Can we say the same about the families of the emperor? Because
yes.
your dad was a very close aide to the emperor. So every access the emperor has, he may have it as well, because he was going to these leaders to different African countries representing the emperor himself.
Yeah.
We know how majestic the emperor was back then. He was respected and loved mostly by many people around the world, especially people of black color, or people of that orientation. So there is this saying attributed to one of the daughters of the emperor as saying that counting the number of Ethiopians, she said that their number, the Ethiopians' number, is maybe close to 1,000 or hundreds. Thousands, not even hundreds, not even thousands, because she was counting only the nobility, not the rest of the people. So, can you say something about that? Because we have to clear everything out in that way.
So my father came again from a humble background.
Yeah.
So one thing that you have to understand was the emperor's government was divided into 2. There was the people who came from humble background, like my father, the Prime Minister Akil Abdul, and most of the ministers, and then there was the aristocracy. And I feel that the government was toppled because of that, because it was very weak. It was a divided government. It's not to say that the aristocracy didn't have ideas. There were so many there that were asking for change as well. This side was asking for change, of course. And my father actually gave a memo to the emperor, basically asking him that it was time for him to step down, to hand over power to his son, the crown prince, later to the Ethiopian people. So these were ideas that were coming on this side, and some from the outside as well. I wouldn't categorize everyone as that. I haven't heard you said the daughter. I know most of them. Used to know most of them. And to be honest with you, I know them, and I know the grandchildren as well. And I've never seen as humble people as ever. I mean, I'm sure if you had one of the granddaughters or grandsons here, you'd even have a better perspective, I believe. But Obviously, I mean, the people want to change, and it came, and change is necessary. The type of change that came maybe was not the one that we all wanted, obviously, because it was, I think, brutal at the end. But again, I think, a lot was said during Mengistu's time, because since his government cannot produce as much as the emperor's government, it was the best thing to do was talk about negative stuff. They said this, they said that. So instead of producing, and let me look at what the emperor did and his government. We have, of course, the OAU. We have Ethiopian Airlines. We have Addis Ababa University. We have Tikur Ambassa. We're still using those establishments today. So if I go back and ask, what did the socialist regime, what did they present to Ethiopians? I mean, I don't know. So, but the best thing to do was say really negative things about that government. And that's why we don't even know about Ketema Yifru today, because it was all negative, like as if Ethiopian history started from 1974 when the colonel took over. And fortunately, that's not the case. And thanks to people like me, now we're writing and we're telling the truth. So the victims are telling the truth now, and now we're getting most of the story. So there was a lot of propaganda back then. And I remember, in fact, I was even wondering, I was like thinking, oh my God, they did this and that. And then the government changed, and I witnessed with my own eyes. I've seen several governments after that. And when you look at it, I mean, there were negative things during the emperor's time. I mean, no questions asked, no questions there. But I always believe that we should look at the positive. What was the contribution of a certain government? And I think when we look at the emperors, there's so much to talk about, including the OAU now that we're talking about, and so forth.
Amazing. Let's talk about the Ethiopia's inclination during the emperor's time towards a non-aligned movement.
Yeah.
Do you really believe that's the right policy for the world that we are now in? And you know what is happening around the world today as we're having this conversation, a lot is happening. So I heard you advocate for that movement.
Yeah.
What is your stand today?
So let me tell you, when the emperor's government decided to be non-aligned, that was the Cold War. That was during the Cold War. And then you had to be either on the left or the right.
Yeah.
Because they didn't take any prisoners back then. They were like, you're here or there.
Yeah.
For us to recognize China, it took us quite some time.
Absolutely.
To open an embassy. But the emperor, and thanks to people like my father, convinced the emperor to be non-aligned. If you can do it then, you can do it today. Because now, there's BRICS, right? And there's the West. I don't think that they're that strict. They're not that strict to tell you, oh, you can't be in the BRICS, or we're not going to give you economic help or whatever. It was bad back then. So I'm thinking now you can do both for your country. I think why I like non-alignment is because you operate through national interest, right? So you get some from here, some from there. Their fight should not be ours. When they say elephants fight, it's the grass that gets messed up, right? So that's my take. That's why I said
absolutely. Yeah. But can you think of any country now which is not aligned? I mean, we can see the face value and we can say this country is not aligned. But you see it having some kind of alignment in one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's not some kind of conspiracy theory or something like that. Any country you find in the world, for example, the leader of the US, he goes around asking for people to help in this way and that way, even today. And if one country replies in positive or negative, he'll be aligned in one of the blocks, his block or the other block. I don't know how we can categorize or give it a name, but do you really believe that a country can remain non-aligned today?
I don't think it's permanent now. It's because this administration is not going to be there for long.
No,
because it's only 3 years for the president. So when we look back during Biden's time, I think it wasn't that strict because South Africa, for instance, is a BRICS member. South Africa does business with America, even today. So it's the economy that actually will determine whether you can do this or that. So for me, maybe this president might be a little bit strict, but it's temporary because the president is not going to be there for long. He's there for only 3 years, and after 3 years, I think we'll go back to doing business again. Because India, for instance, India is part of BRICS. They're aligned, yet they do business with the US. That for me is non-alignment because you do business here, it's not like strict. Like, I'll tell you a good example.
All right.
Ethiopia, during the socialist days, they never did business with America. They were in the Soviet camp, and that was it. They wouldn't do anything. In fact, every relation that they had with America was done. It's in '84 when we had the drought that the Americans came in and helped. So now I don't think it's that strict, to be honest with you. I mean, you can be aligned, but yet you can do business. Look at South Africa. I mean, yeah, words were being thrown by the US and South Africa, but still, if you ask me, they're still doing business together.
All right. Okay. As a political scientist, how do you evaluate the situation of Africa in terms of development and where the continent could be and where it is today? I mean, we hear about people, leaders, and the media talk about the resources that Africa has and the potential that Africa has, but we just talk about it. Nothing is coming out of that. For example, a country within the continent, with oil-rich country, you see that country, there is lack of infrastructure. People are not going to school. There is no proper medical services and things like that. So what is your take on that?
The most frustrating issue is that, I think, like you said, we have so many resources in Africa. Let's take the Congo. I mean, we're talking about diamonds, and everyone is like once part of Congo, right? I think at the end of the day, it's up to the governments because you have to put your people first, right? So if you don't put your people first, and there's this country that I'm not going to mention, but when you have the leaders, their children going out buying Ferraris and doing whatsoever, and so forth, how do you develop your country? The oil that you have is not the property of your family. It's the property of the people. The minerals that you have is not the property of your family or the government itself. It's the property of the people. If you think that way, then you start developing your country. The kids who are supposed to go to school will be going to school. And I believe that's why we're here. I mean, of course, there are hands manipulating us from outside because obviously they want the minerals, they want the oil. But at the end of the day, we have to blame us. We have to blame those who are in charge because you're there for your people, not for yourself, right? So there are countries who are accountable now, who are doing good for their people with little resources. So, but as you said, a country that has oil, infrastructure, they have no infrastructure. They're actually fighting among themselves to get most of the funds from the oil. I mean, what is that? If you are given that opportunity to serve your people, serve your people. That's my thing.
Okay, amazing. I heard you talk a lot about your dad, and I heard you address him as a very humble guy. How do you define humble or being humble?
So I spent a couple of years with my father once he was out of prison, and anyone that he meets, whether it's a person in a suit, a tie, or whether it's anyone who is working this very small job, you treat them the same. One thing about him is that he never forgot where he came from, and he actually talked about it. Some people don't talk about the past because they always want to talk about where they are now. But if you think back and if you treasure your past, I think that would make you very, very humble. And it's not only me who says that, it's people who have met my father. The one thing that they talk about is how humble he was. It's later on that they discover what he's contributed, his contributions. But and that's the thing. I mean, with my father, I've seen him. He's been to the White House 3 times. He's met JFK. He's Johnson, Nixon. He's been knighted by the Queen. Queen Elizabeth.
That is news.
Yeah, he has been. But he couldn't take that title, sir, because he's a foreigner. But so he's been around the world, but still Ketema Yifru, the guy from Gara Muleta. That's how he treats people. And for me, I wouldn't have written the book if he wasn't like that. That was why I wrote the book, because he deserved it. I mean, he unless you asked him, he wouldn't tell you about what he did. And that was that for me, that's being humble. He never said, "Hey, this is Ketema Yifru, open the door." No, he wasn't like that. He wasn't like that.
Of course, he's your dad.
Yeah, I know.
You would have him portrayed that way, but people have ideas about him, so it could be. We can have testimonials from different part of the country and people that he worked with. Okay, your dad studied in the U.S.
Yes,
and he had the chance to meet with officials from the U.S.
Yeah.
Would you say that he was impacted by what he saw in the U.S. in terms of politics and development? Or how would you characterize his return from there and coming to Ethiopia and having these conversations, advising the emperor? And would you say he was impacted in any way?
I think he was. I mean, as far as the development was concerned, I mean, as far as talking about development, I mean, you're in the U.S., you see how far they've gone. That, and of course, the way he was also treated as a black person there. It was before the civil rights. So this was during those days when they say blacks and dogs are not allowed. So he got a taste of that. And that basically took him to that Pan-Africanist mentality, basically. And I think that was good because he was able to convince the emperor to go on that path as well. So I think it helped being in the U.S., looking at all that development. That's, I mean, when you look at it, he was there during the late 40s, and the U.S. was like amazing back then too. So that probably had a lot of impact. But and as far as the continent is concerned, though, it made him that black person, that person that should fight for the rights of Africans, and that the treatment that he got from the U.S.
Okay. Tell me about the memo that he wrote to the emperor. In Ethiopia, we have a saying, "Nigus aikasesem samay aitarasem." I mean, talking against the emperor is like impossible.
Yeah.
He literally brought this guy up, gave him education, gave him all these assignments, and made him this popular guy. And he wrote a memo asking him to step down. Tell me about that.
So I think one thing was that, you mentioned it earlier. He was very close to the emperor. And most of the advices that he gave him, he accepted. And that was mostly on foreign policy, of course. It was not internal. Internal affairs, of course, any leader, if you ask them to step down, you're gone. I don't care where it is. So for him, I think at the end of the day, the difference between my father and the rest of the cabinet or government officials was that he was going around Africa. He was seeing changes, he was seeing Kwame Nkrumah, 66. He was toppled. Everywhere he goes, those leaders that he knew are going. Why? Because they were a step, they could not accept change. They were not doing enough for their people. And he knew that it was going to come to Ethiopia. And he had seen some of the countries that were run by the military. I mean, I respect the military, but that's not their job. As far as running a country, that's not their job. It's protecting the country is their job. So he knew that this was going to happen. And so country first, and whoever did that for you is next. So he, it was basically balancing, right? The country or the emperor, country came first for him. And he gave him the memo. He was the foreign minister when he gave him the memo. I mean, this man was up there. I mean, he had everything, very much respected, not only in Ethiopia, in Africa, and internationally as well. But he decided to sacrifice that. And it was a sacrifice. He was removed from his position. Once the emperor read it, he was in Harar, came back the next day. And of course, there were some who advised that, not only to remove him, but to put him in jail.
Wow.
So that didn't happen because I think the emperor also put into consideration the fact that, the OAU and all that stuff, internationally, he made him this huge, the emperor was huge before that, but when you're the man who's said to have created the OAU and all those conflict resolutions and everything that my father was behind, I think the emperor put that into consideration, and he decided, okay, you know what? I'll take him out of the limelight, put him into another ministry. And that was it for my father. So 2.5 years later, it happened.
Okay, he gave him 2.5 years.
No, 2.5 years later, the revolution happened.
The revolution happened.
So it was 71 that he handed over that letter. And basically, everything that he wrote there happened. And it's unfortunate. It's not only my father who actually advised the emperor to change certain things or either step down. Others also had. But, when you think about it now, he's an emperor. Emperors don't step down. Or any leader for that matter. If you ask them to step down, I think nobody would step down.
Would the question be correct or relevant if it was framed like reform? Maybe wasn't your government or change things?
Yeah, but reform wouldn't have done it because a new person had to come in. A new person had to come in because the emperor was old now. So a new person with different ideas would listen to advisors and whatever. And the emperor had done his bit. He had done so much. But now it was time. According to my father, it was time for him to go and to lead the country to a different path now. And he's seen the discontent in Ethiopia in the 60s. The youth student movement was, it was loud. And unfortunately, the government couldn't hear it. Some of the members couldn't hear it. And of course, it happened. 1974 happened. The revolution happened.
Okay, amazing. Great. Tell me about the 60 ministers or officials who were put in jail and executed. Was your father part of that?
Well, he was part of he was actually the first. There were 8 who were put in prison at first. My father was the first.
All right.
So, and then the rest joined. So 60, that's the count. And they were all together when they decided to kill them. It was in I think it's Unity Park now, the palace. It was Emperor Milik's palace back then. So So they decided one night to, decide the fate of these human beings that they had incarcerated. You know how they decided? They said, okay, you know what? There had 108 members, Derg officials. So they decided, okay, you know what? We'll raise our hands. If someone has 50 and over, he'll be killed. Let me tell you, I mean, these are captains and, lower ranking officials. They wouldn't even know these officials, to be honest. To be honest with you, they didn't even know, most of them. It was purely rage. It was stupidity. It was criminal, to be honest with you. And when you see most of these officials, the contributions that they've made for this country, it's sad. I mean, it's sad. They decided, these young men decided in one night to kill those people. They were not brought to court. It was just done by these 108. And I call them criminals, I'm sorry. Because if you kill human beings that you have in prison without putting them in court, that's criminal for me. And my father's friends were in there. His colleagues were there. His boss was there. It's sad. And they decided, and my father was lucky. Because apparently he didn't get that 50 votes or up. And this is what I heard now.
Maybe because they don't know who he is at all.
Maybe not. Who knows?
He was a foreign affairs minister during that.
He was. And, there are certain people that they would see on TV.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And back then, we didn't have Facebook or anything like that. Social media is not there. So
Definitely.
you would not know what these people were working on. You would not know their contributions. And these guys decided, you know what, we'll end their life. And that's what they did. And I think that was a huge shame. That the saddest moment in our history, I believe, because I don't think officials have been executed this way before that, and even now, nobody has done that. So, and then I see these members writing books and talking about how good it was during their time. Nobody takes accountability. It's not only the 60 officials that we're talking about. We're talking about young people. People that some of us knew who were taken from their homes and who were killed. So those were the days. I mean, that's why a person like me fled the country. And many people those days. And I think those were really sad days. And it's unfortunate.
Is it just sheer stupidity that can make you do this kind of things, or is it lack of awareness, lack of education? Maybe, these people cannot control their emotion. There is no discipline in terms of understanding the contribution of these people. But the way I see it, they have an idea, they have a concept of these people having everything they want, sending their children out to study, and they have this stereotypical idea of the individual. So that mostly, I believe, comes from lack of understanding, lack of education, and lack of comprehending what is happening. So I heard you talk about education, and I heard you that people asking you what your priority is. Educating the public is one of the things that you actually prioritize. Would you relate it to that lack of it?
Maybe, but again, I have to ask we have to ask ourselves: were they really the people to lead the country? They were not. The military hijacked the
revolution.
The revolution. They did. They hijacked it, and they thought that we're capable of leading the country, and we all know what happened when they led the country. We all know. I mean. Like you said, why would you kill people? This is, I don't care how miseducated or the less education that you have. Killing someone is basically criminal. I can't explain it, basically. there can't be no reason, because these people are under, they were prisoners.
Yeah.
So there were no harm to them. They were in prison. The least that they could have done was put them to courts and maybe see what happens. I mean, I thought, that would have been the right thing to do. But again, I heard that amongst them, there were people who were manipulating the course of justice, basically, and not to mention names. But now we know who was behind this.
Yeah.
So it was very easy to manipulate these young people and say, you know what, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that. It's best to kill them. Oh my God. I mean, how about putting them in prison and just leaving them there for a bit and maybe send them to the courts? But it never happened that way. And I'm sure some parts of them regrets what they did. And I've heard one or two saying that. Unfortunately, I haven't heard the leader himself acknowledging the fact that he made, it's not a mistake. I don't call it a mistake because, I hear them saying it was a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's a criminal act. Killing someone is a criminal act for me. Mistakes are, I think, defined in a different manner. Yeah.
All right. You mentioned the projects that the African Union has today, including Agenda 2063 and the others. We've been hearing about these projects for the last 10 or plus years. Do you really believe that we'll see any change in terms of reaping the fruit of these projects for the continent anytime soon?
So before this 2063 project, there was one in 1980. They called it the Lagos Plan of Action.
All right.
Had beautiful things in there too. What they didn't have was funding. I don't know what the funding is like here. It's all about funding. And if they do get the funding, why not? But again, I'm skeptical sometimes when I think about the funding and also where the funding comes from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if the funding comes from where we think it's going to come from, I don't know. Because this is not an African project then. It's a project from somewhere else. So again, manipulation. Will they actually give us the funding is the question also. Look at the GERD, for instance, the Grand Renaissance Dam. We had to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes, I don't know how to say this, but there are certain countries that don't want you to develop. So I don't know. Let's see. I'm still hopeful. You have to be hopeful. You can't give up. So 2063 huge projects. I mean, they've been talked about for many years. I just want to see one project that's completed, and then once we see that, I'm sure we'll all be happy.
I mean, the reason I raised this question is because you hear, for example, a union like the European Union, and you see people moving within the European Union, the union without any difficulty. People having a passport of one of the countries in there, they move around as they want. Now there is a Brexit and they may not access UK or England, or whatever the name they give to that place. I'm not hating. And that is happening in that part of the world. But we have around 54 countries recognized by the African Union and the UN. And there is another place also which is not recognized in that position, a Sahrawi or a country like that. Yeah. Can we at least do that? I mean, it's part of that project.
Yeah.
A baby step is a good thing.
Sure.
I mean, you can consider what you have, you can analyze the resources and everything you have, but you should act upon the promises that you get. Some of the projects may not require you to have a huge resource.
True.
Why don't you act?
For instance, the free movement of people in Africa, and we've seen that in South Africa, right? So when you open the borders, people come in. And it's not as if they're coming in to steal your stuff. It's like they're trying to work. Xenophobia, we've seen that. We feel that when foreigners come, I don't call them foreigners, these are our brothers and sisters, but this is the mentality now. So when they come in, the people feel that they're going to take their jobs and what? No, they're not going to take their jobs. They're going to help out the economy. That's how I see it. These are our brothers and sisters. We have to open up our borders. But again, how much is Pan-Africanism being taught in these countries? Because there's no difference between a Ghanaian and a Nigerian or an Ethiopian. They're all African. And if I'm an African, I should be allowed to go through Africa without passport. In fact, I think it was Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania who had this agreement where a Ugandan can come to Kenya with his ID and he can live there and work there. This is what we have to do. And I think Rwanda is part of it now too. So we have to open our borders. Like you said, it doesn't cost much as far as from the governments or the countries. But again, I think this is the fear that we have of people overwhelming us, and the fact that we have little resources ourselves. And we're afraid of sharing those resources. They're going to take it from us. We have to, teach our people that it's okay. Our governments have to be aware of the fact that these borders were, in the first place, not made by us. It was made by those people in Germany, wherever it was, the Berlin Conference.
Yeah, the scramble for Africa.
The scramble for Africa. So, it's time to rethink exactly, as Africans. And it's time to serve our own people. And the only way you can serve your people is, like you said, baby steps. Baby steps would be, the right thing would be open your borders for your own brothers and sisters. We open it for others. It's when, people like us, when they come, we say, why are they here? Come on. This is the most ridiculous thing ever. But let's see.
All right. I want you to address one point, one issue, very, very critical. Wherever we go, there is a claim that as an Ethiopian, we distinguish ourselves as being no black. People in different parts of the continent, Africa, have this idea that we don't consider ourselves to be black. One, is that true? Because if it is an incident or some group of people are claiming that they're not black, that can be addressed as that. This group doesn't claim to be black. But is it a general thing? Do we say that because you have this experience of living in different parts of Africa and outside Africa, in the US and North America and Jamaica and other places that I didn't mention it here. You could mention them. So tell me about this issue.
So I don't know how someone who lives in sub-Saharan Africa can claim that they're not black. I find it funny, to be honest with you, but I see that a lot. And when you see that, you want to talk to the people, and it's purely out of ignorance. I don't think it's malicious. I don't think it's basically someone trying to say, I don't like black people. That's not it. It's just that sometimes this independence thing, we take it to a little bit further than it's supposed to be. Too much. We are black people. There's nothing to it. We're black, sub-Saharan Africa. We're not in the north. We're in sub-Saharan East Africa. So we're black people. I don't know where this is coming from. But my advice to my fellow brothers and sisters, Ethiopians, is that look at yourself in the mirror. You're nothing special. You're no special than the Ghanaian, Nigerian, Tanzanian. We're all the same. We're all black. We're Africans. We should be proud of our skin color. We should be proud of our heritage, cultures. And, we should embrace our African identity, our blackness. Basically, that's my advice.
Okay. What is the most important thing for Africa today?
I think the most important thing for us now is to development, I think. For me, it's development, because it's to get ourselves out of this mess that we're in, right? We can't have most of our population not being educated, you know. We should have been out of that a long time ago, but these are the things. We should have most of our population be in the middle class, you know. That's what we should strive on. I think that's the most important thing for me. I want to see little kids going to school, because my kid's going to school. I want to see kids going to school as well, because my kids were lucky enough. They got an education, and I want to see the majority of Africans going to school. I want to see the majority of Africans having food on their table. Basically, that's what we should strive on. And hopefully, you know, the governments will look at what they're doing and change their courses, I think, hopefully.
Is there any question that you would wish I asked you?
I think you've actually covered everything, which was amazing. And I had such a wonderful time answering them as well.
Okay. Mekonen Ketema Yifru, thank you for being kind. Thank you for being generous with your time and with everything. And thank you for being a voice for Pan-Africanism and the African people.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here, Abraham. I appreciate it very
All right.
much.